Home Secretary Suella Braverman has warned that the UK could become an Islamist nation with nuclear weapons within the next 20 years. Now, we had this story, we were discussing this story, and lots of you, in fact, nearly all of you, agree with Suella Braverman. So, what do we make of it now? Has multiculturalism failed? Do you agree with Suella? Most of you did earlier on. So let's see what's happening, how you're all feeling now. Joining us now is former spokesperson for Reform UK, Gawain Towler, and Jacob Williams, the head of domestic policy for Pickthall House. Thank you very much for joining me, gentlemen. So, Suella Braverman, she has suggested that the UK could become the first Islamist nation with nuclear weapons. She said this in America, said Britain could fall into the hands of Muslim fundamentalism and become like Iran. She made these comments at a speech to the far-right Heritage Foundation think tank in Washington, echoing what Vice President J.D. Vance had said previously. Now, as I said, lots of love in the room for Suella's comments so far. What do you make of what she's got to say?
And as you said, she was following the comments of Vance before before the inauguration. I think there's a level of tongue-in-cheek and of hyperbole in what she has to say. But what you don't have, what I don't have, what the viewers out there in England and Britain don't have is the access that she had to, as Home Secretary, to documents and reports and briefings from the security services that I don't have. So she is a King's Counsel. She's a senior lawyer. She has been Home Secretary. And whilst one can dismiss it as hyperbole, I think one should take a little bit more caution in doing so. I think to describe the Heritage Foundation as far-right is also pushing it a bit. They're a right-wing think tank in America. They're a huge operation over there, but I think far-right is overstating it. And that would say that anybody who voted for Trump is far-right, and I think that's, again, overstating, in which case 50% of the American population are. I don't think that doesn't work. But she does highlight some serious, and she's talking about some serious issues. The birth rate, who is being born in this country, the fact that our population is going up, as we've seen recently with the ONS study. The population is going up, and it's not going up from what one might call the native British. It's coming up from immigration. 1 in 3 babies in this country are born to non-British mothers, including 2 of my own children. And so this is a fact. This is happening now. Whether that translates into an Islamist takeover and an Islamist country with a nuclear bomb, I thought, well, Pakistan has nuclear weapons, and I think they're probably more likely to be the first Islamist nation with a nuclear bomb than ourselves. However, there are serious concerns, and maybe sometimes you use hyperbole in order to highlight concerns.
OK. I mean, Jacob, do you think Gawain's got a point here? I mean, Suella has been Home Secretary. So she has seen stuff that none of us have had a party to know about. So do you think maybe she may be exaggerating here and she's getting the headlines, which she is, but do you think maybe there might be some truth in it?
I don't think there's any truth at all in this claim. I think it's at best a fantasy. The notion that there's going to be some kind of plot to take over Britain, turn it into Iran in the next 20 years, if she had access to some secret information that no one else had, it begs the question why nobody else in government or the civil service had this information. Now, no one is going to deny there are some attitudes that are concerning among Britain's Muslim population. We wrote a report on this earlier this week, and the reality is that there are concerning attitudes among many communities. Nearly half of young people under the age of 24 will say when asked that they think we should have a dictatorship in this country.
Yes, I saw that story, yes.
Yeah, there are all kinds of crazy attitudes. 20% of the public think it would be good if we had colonies still, but they're not trying to bring it back or invade former colonies. So, yes, there are problems, but there isn't any Islamist plot. The notion's a fantasy, and I think she's talking absolute nonsense.
OK. Gawain, why is she saying it? Is she saying it to bring herself closer to Trump and to Vance?
Not particularly. I think there's a certain amount of remaining relevant. But I'm not as sanguine as Jacob here. I think that any reading of history over the last 1,500 years to suggest that there isn't a threat from radical Islam to any nation in which radical Islamists live is, I think, a very, very short-sighted.
Well, even Prevent admit that, as useless
But when
as
they're
they
not
are,
telling us that we're all far
exactly.
right, and
but
dangerous,
even Prevent admit that most
watching
of their
the thick of
cases
it and
contain
things.
sort of like, Islamist threat rather than the far-right threat.
Well, yes, of course, because Islam is a proselytising religion. It believes, and OK, many religions do, but we're all very Church of England in this country, and we're rather a cup of tea and biscuits after Mass. But it believes that the world should be Islamic. It believes that if, broadly, Muslims believe that if one is introduced to Islam and rejects it, then you are in some ways bad. And that is just a reality. And to pretend it isn't is to not to have read any history of the last.
I think the reality is that people in
very quickly, unfortunately.
People in Britain are rather mature enough to actually deal with religious disagreements, to disagree deeply about fundamental questions, and still get on, including the vast majority of British Muslims, who are even more likely than the general public to identify with Britain and to oppose political violence too.
And we have, many people getting in touch about Sharia law and ghettos in this country where there is no integration. Do you think people should be encouraged to integrate more?
Absolutely. 90% of British Muslims agree with me and want to integrate. The problem,
90%?
Absolutely right. It's what we found in the report we wrote last week. Mm-hmm. The issue is, yes, there are some problems with these Sharia councils, which, by the way, are not courts. They have no legal standing. And we do have to make sure everyone's aware of their legal rights. But we don't have a Islamist plot. We're not about to become Iran in 20 years. The notion is a delusional fantasy. OK,
and there, gentlemen, we have to leave it, unfortunately. Gawain Towler, thank you very much. And Jacob Williams, thank you very much.
Thank you.